Hello everyone, we are back with Chapter 4, Proportional Relationships, and today we're talking about Lesson 5, using similar figures. Now this is the guided practice. So what you're going to be doing is finding the unknown measures in each pair of similar figures. So the fact that it tells you similar figures, that means that you can find unknown sides because you can use proportions to figure out the unknown sides, and you can also find the unknown angle measures because whenever you have similar figures, all of the angles are exactly the same measure. So I want you to go ahead and start with 1 and 2. Try those on your own, and we will see you in a little bit. Okay, there's our friend the pause dragon. Remind you to pause, and then when you get done with 1 and 2, press play, and we'll see how you did. All right, see you in a bit. All right, we are back. Let's look at number 1. So when I'm looking at number 1, I'm going to zoom in a little bit. I notice that the value that I'm trying to figure out is right here. Here is my x. Okay? So I know that these figures are similar, so I can determine what that value is. So I'm just going to go ahead and identify the similar sides. So let's look at the biggest side first. So the biggest side, I'm going to look at this big. This is a 1, 2, 3, 4. It has a 4-sided figure, which is called a quadrilateral. So the biggest side is right here, 20 over 4. And that's going to correspond with the biggest side here, which is, oh, there's a 7.2. Well, I think this 7.2 actually corresponds with that x, so that might be bigger. So this might be the second biggest side, and WX is going to correspond with this AD right there. Okay? So I think this is actually the biggest side right there. I'm going to leave that blank for the moment. This is the second biggest side, so let's go ahead and take a look at what the third biggest side is. That's going to be right here in the big figure with 17.1. And that's going to correspond right here with the 5.7. And then finally, the smallest side on the big figure would be right here. And that's going to correspond with the smallest side here in the quadrilateral. So at this point, I'm ready to go ahead and set up the last sides that correspond are right here. X corresponds with 7.2 right there. So I'm definitely going to be using that in my proportion because I have to figure out what x is, it needs to be, this set of corresponding sides has to be in my proportion. Now, whether I use the pink set of sides, the orange set, or the yellow set, it really doesn't matter. I can just pick. Let's see here. Nothing is jumping out at me. None of these numbers look too fantastic to work with. So I'm just going to pick the smallest one, so I just have to deal with the smallest numbers. So I'm going to start with the big number on top. So I'm going to start with I'm going to use these ones right here. So this one and this one, that's going to be the, I'm going to use that in my proportion. So I'm going to have the biggest side on top. So it's going to be WX over AB. And that is proportionate to the biggest side here, which is XY, over this side here, which corresponds with this, which would be BC. Now, once I have my proportion, I'm just going to go ahead and stick in my, substitute in my numbers. So WX is the same thing as 12.9. Over AB is the same thing as 4.3. And that is going to equal XY, which is X, over BC, which is 7.2. Now, to figure out what X is, I just need to get X by itself. So X isn't by itself. It's divided by 7.2, so I need to do the inverse operation, which would be to multiply both sides by 7.2. Okay, these 7.2s are going to cancel out each other and become 1. Yeah. And then we're going to have that. So I'm multiplying fractions, but there really is no cross canceling I can do. So I'm just going to have to multiply across. So at the moment, I don't know what 12.9 times 7.2 is. So I'm just going to have to take that up here and do that on my scratch piece of paper, or no, I mean just on the side here. So I'm just going to do it. 3 times 9 is 27. I'm going to write the 7 and carry the 2. 3 times 2 is 6, plus 2 is 8. 3 times 1 is 3. Now I'm moving to the tens place. Because I'm moving to the tens place, I need to put a 0 in the ones place. 7 times 9 is 63. I'm going to write the 3 and carry the 6. 7 times 2 is 14. Plus 6 is 20. Write the 0, carry the 2. 7 times 1 is 7, plus 2 is 9. So then I'm ready to add. So I have 7 plus 0, which is 7. 8 plus 3, which is 11. Write the 1, carry the 1. 1 plus 3, which is 4, and 9. Now, since I'm multiplying decimals, I have to count up the decimal places. So there's 1, there's another one, so that's 1, 2. So that means my answer has to have 1, 2 decimal places. So my decimal's going to go right here, 94.17. So that's what 7.2 times 12.9 is. It is 94.17. And then I'm just going to go ahead and divide that by 4.3. And that's what x is going to equal. So I'm going to have to do that on my side as well. So I'm just going to do it right here. 94.17 divided by 4.3. Now, the one thing you have to remember is whenever you're dividing by a decimal is that you can never divide by a decimal. So you got to move that over one place. So really what I'm doing is I'm dividing 941.7 divided by 43. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. 43, does it go into 9? No. 43, does it go into 94? Yes, it does. I would say it goes in 2 times. 2 times 3 is 6. 2 times 4 is 8. I'm going to subtract. The 4 is not big enough. I need to borrow. It's going to make an 8. 14, take away 6 is 8. I'm going to drop down that 1. So that means 43 goes into 81 one time. 1 times 43 is 43. And then I'm going to have to borrow from the 8, making that a 7. That's going to be 1. 11 take away 3 is 8. And then 7 take away 4 is 3. And I'll have to drop this 7 down. And then put the decimal there. Now I need to figure out how many times does 43 go into 387. Oh my goodness. I'm going to say, let's think about this. 4 goes into maybe 9 times. I'm going to guess 9 times. Let me go up here and just figure out what 43 times 9 is real quick. 9 times 3 is 27. Write the 7, carry the 2. 9 times 4 is 36. Plus 2 would be 38, which would give me 387. So that's perfect. It goes in 9 times exactly. So 9 times 43 we just figured out is 387. There is no remainder. That's the answer. So 94.17 divided by 4.3 is equal to 21.9, and that's what x equals. I'm going to change it around. X equals 21.9. So that is the unknown value. So if you got that right, great job. Okay, let's go ahead and see how you did on number 2. So with number 2, we are trying to determine the angle measure, okay? And remember, angle measures in similar figures, the corresponding angles are always the same. So we just need to figure out, hey, well, what angles are corresponding? So to do that, I just want to match up the biggest sides, the medium sides, and the smallest side. So when I look at this big triangle, I notice that the biggest side is right here. And for the small triangle, the biggest side is right there. So those are corresponding sides. Okay, let's look at the smallest side. The smallest side on the biggest triangle is here. The smallest side on the small triangle would be here. So if you see x, which is what we're trying to figure out, x is actually between the biggest and the smallest side. And so we just need to find that angle, which is between the biggest and the smallest side, which is right here. And these angles, angle F and angle R, they're corresponding. Okay? Which means that angle F is congruent, which means it's the same as angle R. So if angle F is 56 degrees, that means that angle R is 56 degrees, which means that X equals 56 degrees. So if you got that right, great job. Okay, let's move on to problem 3 and 4. Go ahead, I want you to work these out on your own. So go ahead and press pause, work the problems out. When you get done, press play, and we'll see how you did. Okay, we're back with problem number 3. We need to find the unknown value. And so what I'm seeing is the unknown value that we're looking at is an angle measure. So when I'm trying to figure out the angle measures, I need to figure out, well, what angle corresponds to angle F, which is what X is. So to do that, I'm just going to match up the biggest, the smallest, and the medium sides. So let's start with the biggest on the biggest triangle. So the biggest side would be right here, MP. Okay? And then I need to find the biggest side on the smaller triangle, which is the biggest side is right here, FG. Okay? I always think it's easiest to find the smallest after the biggest. I don't know why, that's just what I do. So the smallest side on the big triangle would be right here, and the smallest side on the small triangle would be right here. And if you see again, the angle that we're looking for is between the biggest and the smallest side. And so that means that the angle that's going to correspond with angle F is going to be the angle on the big triangle that is also between the biggest and the smallest side. So that means that P corresponds to angle F, which means they're exactly the same. So angle P is congruent to angle F. And if angle P is equal to 26 degrees, that means that angle F is equal to 26 degrees, which means X is equal to 26 degrees. So if you got that one right, great job. Okay, let's go on to problem 4. Okay, so problem 4. Okay, we have to figure out which sides are corresponding to each other. Okay. So, what I notice about these, this is kind of a weird shape. It's a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5-sided shape. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5-sided shape. And so what I'm noticing is that with this shape, they have two sides which are exactly the same. Okay? So those two sides, it's pretty clear to say that they are... I'm just going to highlight them both. Those are exactly the same, and these are exactly the same right there. So 12 and 12 and 24 and 24. So those are going to correspond with each other. Now I have to determine, well, what are the other corresponding sides? So what I see here is you have two sides on either side of the 2, right? So these two are going to correspond with these two, which means this one is going to correspond with that one. So I'm just going to kind of get that one out of the way. So those two are corresponding sides. Now we just need to figure out how does the X correspond with the 13 or does the X correspond with the 15? And so if I look at this figure, what it looks like is that this figure, if you rotate it here, it would match up, right? So this just is, it's kind of rotated. So if you take this figure and you rotate it, then it would match up where this point would be pointing in this direction. So that means that this 13 would, if it was rotated, the 13 would be on top, which would mean it would correspond with this 25.5. So that's what I'm going to say. I'm going to say that 13 corresponds with 25.5, which means that this the last side, 15, would correspond with the x. So we know that we need this one in our proportion because we're trying to figure out what x is. Now, the other side that we're going to choose, you could choose any of these. How about we just choose the 14 and the 23.8? Okay, we'll choose this one here. So I'm going to start with the biggest figure, so VW or WV. So I'm going to set up my proportion here. WV over AE is equal to big side WX over AB. And now we're just going to fill in the numbers. So WV is the same thing as 23.8 over AE is 14, and that's going to equal WX, which is X, over AB, which is 15. Now we're just trying to determine what X is. So we need to get X by itself. So in order to do that, we need to get rid of the 15. The 15 is related to X through division, so we have to do the inverse operation, which would be 15. We got to multiply by 15 to both sides. Okay? So those cancel and become 1, and it's 1 times X. So now we have X by itself. So now we just need to do this math. There's really no cross-canceling that can happen, so we just need to multiply that. So I'm going to go over here to the side and go 23.8 times 15. And just do that problem. So 5 times 8 is 40. I'm going to write the 0, carry the 4. 5 times 3 is 15, plus 4 is 19. Write the 9, carry the 1. 5 times 2 is 10, plus 1 is 11. Then I'm going to write a 0 because I'm going to the tens place. 1 times 8 is 8. 1 times 3 is 3. 1 times 2 is 2. And now I just add. Hold on, I'm going to check this on top. 5 times 8 is 40. Write the 0, carry the 4. 5 times 3 is 15, plus 4 is 19. Okay, carry the 1. 5 times 2 is 10, plus 1 is 11. Okay, so now we're going to add. Sorry about that. 0 plus 0 is 0. 9 plus 8 is 17. Write the 7, carry the 1. 3 plus 1 is 4, plus 1 is 5, and then 2 plus 1 is 3. And now we have to have the same amount, since we're multiplying with decimals, we have to have the same amount of decimals. So there's 1 decimal here, that means we have to have 1 decimal there. So the number, when we multiply 15 times 23.8, is 357. Now we have to multiply the bottom, which is 1 times 14, which is 14. So nothing really super easy here, except we just have to do the division. So we're going to divide over here. 357 divided by 14. 14 doesn't go into 3. It does go into 35. I'm going to say it goes in 2 times. 2 times 4 is 8. 2 times 2 times 1 is 2. Now I'm subtracting. I'm going to have to borrow. Make that 15, make that 2. 15 take away 8 is 7. I'm going to drop down the 7. 14 goes into 77. I am not sure how many times 14 goes into 77. Let's see here. 14 is kind of close to 15. So 15 goes into 30 2 times, and then 30 plus 30 would be 60, which would be 4 times. And then I would think it would probably be 5 times because 75. I'm going to go ahead and see what 14 times 5 is. So right here I'm going to go 14 times 5. 5 times 4 is 20. Write the 0. Carry the 2. 5 times 1 is 5 plus 2 is 7. So 70. It's going to go in 5 times. And then 5 times 14, I just did it. So it's 70 right here. And then I'm going to subtract, which is going to give me 7. And then I have a remainder, so I need to keep going. I'm going to add a decimal, drop down that 0. And now I have 70, which is totally cool because I just figured out that 14 times 5 is 70, so I know it's going to go in 5 times, and 5 times 14 is 70. I have no remainder, so boom, there you have it. 357 divided by 14 is 25.5. That's what x equals. I'm going to go ahead and put the variable on the left side, and that's the answer. So if you got that one right, great job. Okay, let's go on to the back page. Now, what we're going to do with this is we're going to estimate the height of each object in the picture below. So we have the house, we have the tree, and if you notice there's different types of objects, and then all of the objects have a shadow. So we have this tower, it's called a radio tower, there's a shadow, and there's the length of the shadow is there. We have a lamp post, and there's the length of the shadow. We have a mailbox. Well, we actually have the height of the mailbox, and we have the height of the shadow of the mailbox. So that's nice because we have both of those calculations. Let's look over here. We have a house. We have the height of the shadow of the house, but not the height of the house. And then we have the height of the shadow, or the length of the shadow, but not the height of the tree. So what we're going to be doing is these are all similar triangles because it's dealing with the way that the sun is hitting all of these figures at the same exact time. So that angle that it's creating, they are they're similar. And if you can see here, it creates a triangle. So here we have the height of the lamppost, the length of the shadow, and then when you connect it, you have a triangle. Okay? And you can really do that for each one of these. So if we do the house, right, we're going to have the height of the house, the length of the shadow, and boom. So these two triangles are actually similar, okay? So we can actually figure out what the height of the house is because we can use this mailbox right here because we have the height of the mailbox and we have the height of the or the length of the shadow, and so these are similar triangles, and we can set up a proportion. So we're going to go ahead and find the height of the house by setting up a proportion. So when we look at this, the first thing I'm going to do is figure out, well, what are the corresponding sides. So I'm going to use the big triangle first, okay? So I'm going to have the length of the shadow of the big house first. So that is the distance of 13.3 meters. So that's going to be my first thing is going to be 13.3, and that's going to be over the length of the shadow of the small triangle, which is the mailbox, which is going to be 63 inches. And it's okay that they're in different units, okay? And that's going to equal the height of the house, which is I'm going back to the big triangle, that's the thing I don't know, over the height of the mailbox, which is 45. Perfect. Now I'm just going to figure out what x is, and x is going to give me the height of the house. So I need to get x by itself. So in order to do that, I have to do the inverse operation of division, which is multiplication to both sides. Okay, those are going to cancel and become 1. Now I have x by itself. I just need to determine what this is. So I'm going to cross cancel. When I look at 45 and 63, I know that 9 goes into both of those. 9 goes into 45 5 times, and 9 goes into 63 7 times. So now I'm just going to have to do some multiplication. So I'm going to come over here to the side. I'm going to go 13.3 times 5. And then I'm just going to do that. 5 times 3 is 15. Write the 5, carry the 1. 5 times 3 is 15 again. Plus 1 is 16. Write the 6, carry the 1. 5 times 1 is 5. Plus 1 is 6. Since I'm dealing with decimals, I know I have to have the same number of decimals. So there's 1 decimal place, which means I'm going to have 1 decimal place in the answer. So it's going to be 66.5. So it's going to be 66.5 over 1 times 7, which is 7. So now I'm just going to need to do the long division here. So I'm going to go 66.5 divided by 7. 7 doesn't go into 6, but it does go into 66, and it's going to go in, I'm going to say 9 times. 9 times 7 is 63. I do the subtraction here. 6 take away 3 is 3. That's 0. I drop down the 5, and 7 goes into 35 5 times. Oh, I have to put that decimal there. 5 times 7 is 35 with no remainder, which means the house, I kind of messed up there, so I'm going to write the house is 9.5. Well, that's what x equals. X equals 9.5. And so the house is going to, is going to equal 9.5, whatever the units are. And here we're talking about meters. So the height is going to be in meters. So the house is 9.5 meters tall. So that's kind of cool. We can look at shadows and figure out what the height of different objects are indirectly. So we're going to do this same process for the tree. We're going to figure out how tall the tree is. So we're going to use this same triangle here because we have the height and we have the length of the shadow. Here with the tree, we have the length of the shadow, but we're trying to find the height. Okay? So we're going to go ahead and set up our proportion. So I'm going to do, this is a big triangle, this is a small triangle. I'm going to put the big triangle on top. So I'm going to do the shadow of the big triangle. So that is 39.2 feet. So we have 39.2 feet over the shadow over here of the mailbox, which is 63. And that's going to equal the height of the tree, which we don't know. So I'm just going to call that, height, over the height of the mailbox, which we do know, which is 45. All right, so there's our proportion. Now we just need to figure out what h is. So I'm going to get h by itself. To do that, I have to multiply both sides by 45 because we're dividing by 45. So the inverse operation of division is multiplication. These 45s are going to cancel. I'm left with h. Now I'm multiplying fractions, so I want to look to cross cancel first. I know that 9 goes into both of these. 9 goes into 45 5 times. 9 goes into 63 7 times. And now I just need to multiply across. So first I am going to do 39.2 times 5. 39.2 times 5. So 5 times 2 is 10. 5 times 9 is 45 plus 1 is 46. 5 times 3 is 15 plus 4 is 19. And there you go. And since we're multiplying with decimals, we have to have the same amount of decimal places. So there's 1 decimal place here, which means there has to be 1 decimal place there. So it is 196. So 5 times 39.2 is 196. And then we have to multiply across on the bottom. So 1 times 7 would be 7. So then we just have to do this division right here. So I'm going to go 196 divided by 7. Does 7 go into 1? No. Does 7 go into 19? Yes, 2 times. 2 times 7 is 14. When I subtract 9, take away 4 is 5. I bring down the 6. 7 goes into 56 8 times. 8 times 7 is 56 with no remainder. So boom, there we have it. The height is 28. Now we just need to see what the units are. What are the units of the tree? And the units of the tree, if you look really, really closely, they are in feet. That means that our answer is also going to be in feet. So the height of the tree is 28 feet. Oh, whoops, you didn't see that. height of the tree is 28 feet. I wrote it in right there. Okay, perfect. So now what I want you to kind of do on your own is I want you to go ahead and figure out, well, what is the height of the lamppost and what is the height of the radio tower? So you're just going to go ahead and make those into triangles and use the mailbox again as your reference triangle and just go ahead and see what those are. So where's my friend the pause dragon? Oh, here's my friend reminding you to pause, work out problems 7 and 8. When you get done, press play and we'll see how you did. Okay, see you in a bit. Okay, we're back with the lamppost. We're going to figure out the height of the lamppost. So I'm going to go ahead and draw in that triangle. So here is the height, which I don't know. Here's the length, and that's my triangle right there. So I'm going to go ahead and set up a proportion for the lamppost. I'm going to have the big triangle over the small triangle, and I'm going to start with the shadow. So this says 315 inches. So I'm going to have 315 inches. That's the shadow of the lamppost, and that's going to be over the shadow of the mailbox, which is 63 inches. And that is going to equal the height of the lamppost, which is what I'm trying to figure out. I don't know what that is, so that's equal to X, over the height of the mailbox, which is 45 inches. So there's my proportion. I'm just going to go ahead and figure it out. So I need to get X by itself. Right now, X is not by itself. It's being divided by 45, so I have to do the inverse operation of division, which would be multiplication, multiplying both sides by 45. Those cancel out and become 1. Now I have X by itself. I need to go ahead and cross cancel. So 9 goes into both of those. 9 goes into 45 5 times. 9 goes into 63 7 times. Now I just multiply across. I don't know what 315 times 5 is, so I'm going to go ahead and do that on the side right here. So 315 times 5. 5 times 5 is 25. Write the 5, carry the 2. 5 times 1 is 5, plus 2 is 7. 5 times 3 is 15. Yeah, that's just it. So it's 1,575 over 1 times 7, which is 7. Now I need to do long division to figure out what that is. Okay, 7 does not go into 1, but it does go into 15. It goes in 2 times. 2 times 7 is 14. When I subtract, there's 5, take away 4 is 1. I drop down the 7. 7 goes into 17 2 times. 2 times 7 is 14. When I subtract, 7 take away 4 is 3. And then I drop down the 5. And finally, I have 7 going into 35 5 times. 5 times 7 is 35 without a remainder, so I know I'm done. So boom, there's the answer right there. X is equal to 225. So that means my lamppost, the height of my lamppost is 225, and then I just need to figure out what the units are. So I'm going to zoom into my lamppost, and if you can see right here, my units are in inches. So that means that my lamppost height is also going to be in inches. So if you got that right, great job. Okay, on to the radio tower. Let's see how you did there. I'm going to go ahead and make another triangle. So here is the length of my shadow, the height of my radio tower, and then boom, there's, oh, that wasn't really good, but it's okay. That's the big triangle, that's the small triangle. I'm going to go ahead and set up my proportion. So I'm going to start with the big triangle, and the length of the shadow. The length of the shadow is, I'm going to zoom in, I can't see that, 156.8, okay? The length of the shadow is 156.8, so I'm going to write that right here, 156.8. And that's going to be over the length of the shadow of the mailbox, which is still 63 inches. That's going to equal the height of the tower, which we don't know, so I'm going to call that H, height of the tower, over the height of the mailbox, which is still 45 inches. Okay, now we're just going to use our algebra and solve this proportion. So I want to get H by itself. Right now, H is not by itself, so there's a 45 underneath it. It's h divided by 45, so I need to do the inverse operation of division, which would be multiplication. I'm going to multiply both sides by 45. These cancel out and become 1. I can cross cancel here. 9 still goes into both. 9 goes into 45 5 times. 9 goes into 63 7 times. Now I just multiply across. And I have gotten h by itself. Okay, so I'm going to go over here to the side and just do the multiplication. 156.8 multiplied by 5. Okay, 5 times 8 is 40. I'm going to write the 0, carry the 4. 5 times 6 is 30, plus 4 is 34. Write the 4, carry the 3. 5 times 5 is 25, plus 3 would be 28. I'm going to write the 8, carry the 2. 5 times 1 is 5, plus 2 is 7. Now, since I'm multiplying decimals, I have to have the same amount of decimals in my problem as well as my answer. So there's 1 decimal place, which means my answer needs 1 decimal place. So that's where I put my decimal there, which means 5 times 156.8 is actually equal to 784. And then that is over 1 times 7, which is 7. So now I need to do the long division to figure out how many times 7 goes into a 784. So 7 goes into 7 one time. 1 times 7 is 7. There's no remainder. I drop the 8 down. 7 goes into 8 one time. 1 times 7 is 7. I subtract. 8 take away 7 is 1. I drop down the 4. And this is going to look great. 7 goes into 14 two times. 2 times 7 is 14. There's no remainder. So my answer is 112 equals h, or my height equals 112. So I'm going to write 112 here in my answer. Now I need to figure out the units. So I'm going to go back to my radio tower and figure out what were the units for the radio tower. And it looks like it is in feet, which means my height is also going to be in feet. So this is going to be 112 feet. So if you got that right, yokinekimashita, you did a good job, and we will see you next time. Bye-bye.